Alyssa. I'd love to give a bit of an introduction about her. So Alyssa is the founder and director of Gather and Grow, which is a HubSpot Gold partner focusing on revenue operations, HubSpot CRM implementation, migration, and automation. She is a great marketer. She is a mix of technical, data-driven, and creative with Google Ads experience. She believes in customer service is the heart at everything we do, starting with getting CRM automation processes and the teams aligned so that businesses can grow and scale sustainably. So I'd love to welcome Alyssa. Let's give her a huge round of applause, and over to you.
I'm just going to share my screen and let me know when you can see my screen. All good? Okay, perfect. So as Des introduced me, thank you for introducing me so nicely. I definitely came from a marketing background, and I work with sales teams, I work with customer service teams, and the idea is really about aligning everyone. And you'll see that throughout my slides shortly. So even though I may not be doing what you do on a day-to-day basis, I think there's a lot of cross knowledge and experience I can share. And, it's about giving you food for thought through this webinar. So thank you for attending. So today's topic is about how we can scale your community operations. And let's start with some context. Why automation, particularly, I think, in the past, even today and in the future, is so important. I think a lot of our newsfeed kind of looked like this. All we saw was about recession, interest rates rising, inflation rates, tech companies laying off people. So there is a lot of uncertainty in the world. And that's why I think your role is even more important. So what do we not like about the recession as community builders? The first one is reduced budgets and having lack of control. But there's actually opportunity around us. And one is about not slowing down on member outreach, content, events, if the business can afford it. And it's about being smarter with our time and resource allocation. I know your mind might be thinking, oh, but there's so much I want to do. I don't know where to start. You're kind of like chasing your own tail a little bit. So I'm going to show you a framework that I think you can expand on even in the future. But, let's just start with this 3-step framework and then build on it. So let's start with 2 formulas. One's the efficiency ratio, which tells us how efficient a company is at using its existing resources. And usually expenses is kind of like a bad word because it's money going out of the business. But I want to change the way we think about expenses and break them down and find which ones actually is an opportunity for us. So I'm going to highlight a few. Some are like events, training, technology, costs of goods and services, employee wage, and how long it takes to collect our money back. I know by the time that you come in to play, the marketing and sales team had already worked on generating those leads, converting those leads, convincing them that your product or services is the right solution for them. But you play an extremely important role about retention and upselling and cross-selling and just building that brand. So to be honest, I think you are a marketer to me too, just towards the customer side. So these are often looked at as expenses, but I want us to think of them as opportunity of how we can improve operations, automation, and so on. The second formula is the sales formula. And there are multiple, so this is the general formula for a company to generate revenue. And it's quantity times conversion rates times AOV, it's average order value, frequency, and LTV is lifetime value. I do believe as marketers, sales, customer service, community builders, we have control or influence really over every aspect of this formula. But there are 3 parts that I think we have more influence in as community builders. So the first one is conversion rates. So how can we improve like sales velocity? We can't control how someone decides on a website and so on, but you as a community builder, you are building that brand, you're building that trust, you're giving more knowledge, and people are emotional buyers. Even if they are logical buyers as well, they do make emotional decisions, and all the relationships that you're building will influence conversion rates. The other one is AOV, so the average order value, which is how we upsell and cross-sell as community builders. You may not be, not everyone will be doing the actual selling, but you do influence it. So I want to, at the end of this, you will see that my message is really about how community builders also think and act as marketers. You're also a salesperson, even though you may not be doing direct selling. And the most important one is lifetime value, which tells us how long a customer is with the business. So the happier we keep our members, the better we are at achieving their goals, the better the stickiness of the customer to the business. Either way, everyone wins, and really lifetime value is a very, very important indicator. So when we are being more efficient with with generating revenue and reducing expenses, or being more efficient with our expenses, it's about then we have the same process at a lower cost, or we can have the same costs but a higher output. Either way, it's very good for the business, good for every department. But to really understand and optimize our internal growth rates, we have to understand and have complete transparency into our operations and data. So how can we achieve this? Let me introduce you to revenue operations, or in short, RevOps. RevOps is about aligning all commercial teams' goals, processes, tech stack, data, and accelerate revenue growth, and most importantly, profit, so that we can build our momentum and continually spin our flywheel faster and faster. So your role is probably more around that service, maybe, and definitely customer in the middle. But as I mentioned, I do believe, in my opinion, you influence marketing, you influence sales. Everyone's really just one big team. So RevOps is about turning leaky buckets into cash-making machines. So for a community builder, it will be something like when you invest in automation technology, you may not see the reward immediately, but at some point, we're not losing things. We're not losing things halfway through the process. There's no leaky buckets. Things are not falling through the cracks. So if we know we are building partnerships or ambassador programs, it's going to eventually come back tenfold for us. And this way, when you're testing out strategies or tactics, running events, running more member engagement campaigns, at some point it's going to come back to the business, because we can, if it's done properly, we can track most, or if not all, we can track most, very important. We know that there is, there's a process, when this happens, this person's going to get notified and so on. And we just know that we're putting money into the right places. So let me start with this three-step framework. I've simplified it so that it's easy for us to just see the big picture, and then you can work on expanding it, because it's quite daunting to know where do I even begin, because my goal here is to think beyond community building and learning how to work with other teams and making sure that we're all aligned for the ultimate business. We're not working departments, we're trying to work together with RevOps, which is why it's called revenue operations. So let's start with the high level expected benefits from investing in RevOps. The first one is being able to build repeatable and scalable processes. The second one is increased productivity. And third is being able to make data-driven decisions. And how we can do that is by first process mapping, so we can identify all our leaky buckets. We need to know where we are right now and where we want to be. And then we can start building out the automation plan. I think a lot of people likes to start with automation because it's rewarding when you feel that you're taking action, but they always miss the like looking back and what's working right now, what's not working, where do we want to be, where time being wasted, and so on. So once we have those two items, then we can think about our CRM data strategy, because the CRM, even try not to think of them as separate. It's very process driven. We need to know where we're working with, what our goals are, and then we work backwards to build that data strategy. So I'm going to introduce you to an Australian B2B service business, just for context, so that you can see that these ideas, you can work in a startup. It can be applied even for larger companies as well, depending on your background. So this client, for example, they are a multi-million-dollar business on track to turn over $1 billion this year. They only really have 3 to 5 salespeople, and the calendars are continuously booked. We have all the different teams, as much as possible, on the shared one platform, and where it makes sense, then we integrate. And they run a very, very lean business. Because they are very conscious about of their expenses, but they're not afraid of spending. We just know that if we spend, we know exactly what we're going to get out of it. And we have very consistent and thorough onboarding process for both employees as well as customers. And a fun fact, we even build our board reports out of the CRM sometimes. So the first one's about process mapping. So the first thing I would like to do is, I always recommend, is let's review our tech stack. You might be thinking more from the community building perspective, and that's fine. Let's just start there, because we want to see what are we using, what tools we're using for meetings, for events, for our CRM, for email marketing, for SMS, for calls, everything. Just list them all out, brain dump all into one place, because we want to make sure that we are not spending too much on unnecessary tech. At what point should they be connected? At what point should they be replaced by something else? My view is always having a piece of tech. We need it only if we have it only if we need it for a specific reason, because we don't also want a tech stack that's disjointed, because that means disjointed experiences for both employees and customers. And if there's one part of the tech stack we're not working or something like that, then the more disjointed tech stack we have, more time spent on troubleshooting errors, more time spent jumping from tool to tool. And it's all about saving even that 1 minute, because it all adds up. And also, we don't want inconsistencies. And then after that, once you know what you're using, it'd be good to write out like the whole process and think about it in detail. What do I spend most time on? What steps do I often forget? What cannot be missed? What's often repeated? Let's just brain dump. Let's not go into solution mode yet. Let's just write what we are doing right now. And then as you're doing, you can start thinking about current versus ideal. I like mapping this out in a Miro board, and then eventually just move it around, and then only start planning later on. And you might be very familiar with this term, playbooks. Whether it's a sales team or customer service team, is really the idea here is about having a very clear understanding of what needs to be done at what point of the process, so that everyone does the exact same thing and consistently. So no one's making up processes. We're trying to remove as much thinking as possible for internal team members and free up their mind, their time to do more strategic, more partnership work, more learning, as you mentioned, or maybe even just going home earlier, and just, and I think someone mentioned beauty or like self-care. And number 4, once we have a clear process, we know exactly how people are going to do exactly when and what. It makes it very easy to hire, because you're going to onboard the same way. You're not redoing the whole process all over again. And we're also setting up the new team member up for success, which then feeds back into the whole loop of hiring, which is an expense, but they're going to generate revenue for us. They're going to keep members happy. They're going to help free up this time of yours and so on. So the mindset I want us to have when we're doing all of that is about how can we remove mundane tasks and be more efficient with our time? And it's about delivering brilliant member experiences. So this is a book that I read multiple years ago. It is designed for salespeople and a little bit for marketers, but I do encourage that even community builders read it, because it's written by Mark Robesch, who's an engineer. So he has a very methodical, calculated way of measuring improvements, measuring how can we measure leading, lagging indicators, how do we measure performance. I think it's definitely very, very relevant even for you. And it's also very easy reading, even though I said like it's written by engineers. So number 2 is about automating with a holistic strategy. I don't want us to create like random automations just because it had the outcome of X that you expected. So I want to think bigger picture. So here's an example where a member lands on a website, they fill in the join community form, they automatically the information gets automatically plugged into the right parts of the CRM. The certain person gets notified, for example, the community manager. How do we want that application approving process to look like? Is it going to remain the one tool? Do we use a different tool? But we need to make sure that this community manager, who's might be dealing with lots of requests, doesn't fall through the cracks. It's very clear where the review process is at. We would automatically then trigger automated welcome email, and then get them to join the Slack, set up their profile depending on how your community is set up, notifying the relevant teams. All of this, you might have been doing this manually, but we want to make sure we can automate as much as possible. Even starting small, and then after that, just learning what works, what doesn't work, and then build on it. So we're not aiming for perfection. And then, what we might have is like pre-event emails, who gets what emails do they get after the first month of being a member? Because we want to make sure they're as happy as possible, and you don't have all the time in the world to reach out to them. So we want to make sure that we are using automation to be as proactive as possible and giving the member options to come to you as well, when the time suits them. And I'm sure NPS is a huge part of your world. So all of that can also be automated depending on the business. So here's just an example of, just thinking from start to finish, and then how can we get them to renew if that's part of your world, or how can you influence that decision, even if it's not like officially your role. So for the client, and I'm sure this is the kind of expected outcome that we can all generally aim for, is like, less floating around G sheets, less disconnected systems. We're trying to remove unnecessary manual emails, definitely less disgruntled members. We want happier customers or members. We want to be able to improve our turnaround time with response and employee onboarding, because at every point you're hiring a new person, it's a cost to the business. So the shorter we can make employee onboarding, the faster the output, and also we're ensuring our expenses are beneficial for everyone. So I'm not going to go into detail with this one because you'll get the slides after, but here are different ideas that you can use for your automation planning. And number 3, that's when we start building out our CRM data, which I think is the most important. And that's why I think your role is so important for a business. But when I say CRM, I don't mean a CRM just for community, unless you need it for specific specific features and so on. But where possible, think about how we can share the same data with marketing, with sales, with customer service, with product. Ultimately, we're trying to work with the same end user, which is our customers/members. But when it comes to CRMs, a few things I want you to remember is data in means it influences our data out. If we have inconsistent data, you're going to have inconsistent outcome. And it's definitely not a set and forget project. So this is the mindset I want us to have when we're doing CRM work. So I don't really like rushing this piece. As community builders, I'm sure we also aim to be data-driven so that we can get insights, track patterns, make data-driven decisions, and then ultimately we're all trying to optimize the business. But often, if we don't do this CRM piece of work, there's going to be a huge gap between data and insights. I'm going to speed through this because I think I've got 8 minutes. Okay. So, here's the few reasons why I recommend building a CRM strategy. It will enrich our remarketing and similar to lists, and we can optimize ads better. So yes, it's not really your world, but you will influence marketing, and the marketing will then influence you back. We can slice and dice our data so to make sure that our emails, SMS, events, and our offers are more targeted and more relevant. And you're confidently spending money in the right place as well. And being able to very easily measure the improvements and where our customer lifetime value is today. And how you can do this is high level, and I can talk about this all day. So this is really just a high level of how we can build a CRM strategy. So I think of these of almost like pillars. So first is definitely mapping out the customer journey and the life cycle stages. I'm just talking about the milestones. I'm not talking about every single person's customer journey because that's going to be unique and different for each person. And then I'll be thinking about listing out all the data points that I think will be important to capture for sales, for myself as a community builder, for how can I influence back to customer service, and then we can share all this information together. And then listing out behaviors that you want to capture to identify potential churn, whether it's using the tools less or maybe not paying on time, and all sorts of different behaviors. It could also be website behaviors, not clicking or opening emails and so on. And last one is being able to pick a CRM that you can scale with wisely. So once you get the slides, you can click on that red link and it'll take you to a blog that I wrote. It's not very long. And I think I cover about 10 points, and it's not really about price. It's not about brand. It's making sure, and it's not about certain features. You read it and you'll see that I look way beyond those usual things that people look for in a CRM. And then what happens if they make that mistake is they end up changing it like every year, and it's a big mess. And yeah, so have a good read. So I've just got a couple of gifts. So one of my favorite gifts is a data dashboard. Just make sure that data is clean. Like, it's really hard to find errors when you're just looking at rows and rows of data. So I like to visually show what's happening with the CRM data. This is more retrospectively fixing things, but also just knowing like performance, activities, and so on. And so to recap, this 3-step framework is about aligning with other revenue teams and not just thinking about what we do as community builders, and agree with shared goals, KPIs, and SLAs, which are service level agreements, and so that we're all aligned, which is what revenue operations is about. And automating holistically with data at the forefront of the plan. So if you want the slides, feel free to connect with me or email me. I think Paz is also going to send them out. And I'm also building a step-by-step RevOps crash course. It's still in production. So I don't have a link or anything yet. So if you want that, so just email me and I'll remember to reach out when that's more ready. It's really designed so that, we all are time poor, which is why we're on this webinar. Nobody really has time to go and read books and make lots of mistakes on their own. It's going to be online. I want to make sure that you can be, you still get some sort of like mentoring or support, but you can do it in your own time, and it's going to be tailored to your own business because you'll be using your business in this course.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Great to hear for your area of expertise. So much knowledge packed in there. I think some of my favorite things to take away were some of the formulas to measure operations. That was really interesting. I never thought about it that way, like mathematical formulas. I also love the detail in the member funnel and the journey that they go through. So thank you so much for sharing. Really keen to see the slides when Paz does send them around. So for now, I'd love to jump into some audience Q&A. We do have a few questions from the audience so far. So those who do have a question, please jump into the queue and click I have a question or post into the chat. But to kick off, we'd love to go through some of the pre-submitted questions from a CCN. So firstly, what are your favorite of all those things you mentioned, all the tactics and all the tools? What is your favorite tech tools to help with automation?
Being a HubSpot partner, of course, HubSpot. But it really depends also with what other tools you're using. For example, I worked with a co-working space before where their community builders are people who also do onboarding. So they use some other tool which is suitable for their industry as well. So it's about making sure that we're aligning with marketing, sales, and in that case of the co-working space, I can't remember exactly what the name was, but we needed to leave the community builders in that space because it was linked to like booking of the rooms and getting access to certain things that's like co-working space related. So for me, definitely HubSpot. But also thinking also what other tools are needed. Sometimes I use Zapier. I don't really always like to use Zapier if I can, because that means there's one more thing to potentially break along the way. But sometimes if you need it, you need it. I don't need a Calendly because HubSpot already has meeting tools, it has forms. Where possible, I have one place that's the central, and then I might add a little bit more from other tools if I really need it.
I think HubSpot would have been a no-brainer. I think a lot of us do use it. And I think that it does have a lot of those tools already included in there. So thank you for sharing. Does anyone in the group have any questions before I do jump into some other questions that other CCNs have admitted? While we are waiting for some other questions, there were some pre-submitted questions, and I'll run into those while we are waiting. But do feel free to put the questions in the chat or raise your hand on Butter. So I guess the second question was, Alyssa, do you have any advice on how to do less cold one-on-one outreach and to scale this effectively?
Sorry, could you repeat that bit?
So the second question was, do you have any advice on how to do less cold one-on-one outreach and how to scale that more effectively?
Yes. So HubSpot also has sales sequences, which is how salespeople would use for their cold outreach. So you can definitely use that as well. So I know it's designed for salespeople, but I always think of it as it's literally an automation of multiple emails and sales to make it look like it came from me, as if I wrote it, and it's super plain text. So why should it just remain as a sales tool just because it was designed as a sales tool? So that's one. I know there's some companies that may not like that tool as much, and they like to use, I think, something called Outreach. I think there is Sales Loft, I believe. So yeah, for me, it comes back down to also integrating back to the CRM, because I want to make sure that the overall data is good. But you need to look at also features. Maybe there are some features that the HubSpot sequences can't offer. And how can we plug, because you said cold outreach. So are we plugging this information from somewhere else, and how can we get that, not do export imports and then do all these sales automation, sales, customer service, community builders automation tools.
Amazing. Yeah, we obviously can't do everything, but we do have a question from Mel. Would you like to hop off mute and ask a question, Mel?
Thanks, Des. Thank you for the presentation, Alyssa. It's actually really timely for us as a business because we are in the process of transitioning from, I suppose, a bought CRM package to now building our own database. And I suppose that transition means that we have a lot of historical data that we would like there. I suppose management has a different perspective, and then I have a different perspective in the marketing and community space. When it comes to the data in, data out, and consistency point that you had earlier on, how do you fill in data gaps in your CRM? I'm not sure if that's a silly question in terms of do you just ask like your members, or is there a way or a best practice about filling those gaps?
So before I answer the filling of the gaps one, when I mean data in, data out, and inconsistent input means inconsistent outcomes, it's really first setting up the CRM strategy, like and thinking about that first and planning that out first, and really thinking before we start creating fields, before we start creating all of those forms, because I think people like to, I think it's more of like a personal reward things. Like, I do something, I tick it off, I get things done. But then actually, what's the foundation first? So if we don't have that foundation, your data in is always going to be wrong or mostly wrong. So that's one part, having a plan, where we're heading, and it's not someone reading knowledge-based articles and then trying to figure it out. For me, I really see there's value in like outsourcing that piece, because there's so many other things that you may not know about the tool, about the system, about what you want. And sometimes having just a third person's perspective helps to challenge what the internal team members already think and know about the business. So I do find that very useful, but again, up to everyone, up to their own decision. So that's one. And then once you have that and you have the right tool, you can leverage automations or technologies to almost remind the internal person, hey, when you move a ticket from this stage to this stage, X, Y, Z needs to be filled in. So that helps to maintain the data integrity, because not every information we can get from the person. We might need a human to ask that question and then fill it in, just because it's literally impossible. And then there's sometimes it's about enriching that data, which means we could be scraping data from other tools and other platforms, and then filling those gaps. So that's what I mean with, and also if like you mentioned like marketing, so I'm sure you'll be asking them, you're trading a form submission, you're trading an insight, you're asking for information, but in trading back value to them. So just think about how we can leverage forms sometimes to capture more information, but that's a bit more of a passive way, I guess.
Awesome, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Alyssa. We do have a question from Selva, who has previously hosted one of these webinars. Good to have you back on, Selva. What sort of operational collaboration do you have between the community and the customer success team? So is this a one-off project, or a continued process, and how do you do it?
I would say the answer is first one-off and then a continued process. So both, because first is that planning piece, the bigger picture piece, and then planning and working together of like what's our starting point. We're not aiming for perfection, but we definitely need to know where we're heading and where we're aligning. We're using the same language. We've got the same metrics. Are the integration set up for us to be able to have those data points for ongoing improvements? So the first one for me is have a plan, work together, what are we tracking, what are the processes like, when do we hand off between you and me, how do we get feedback, all that kind of brain dump and planning. But again, progress over perfection, so don't stress about like getting every single thing perfect. Otherwise, 1 year down the track and you're still having the same conversation. And then after that, it's about an ongoing continuous improvement. How's that been working for you? What information do you need from me? How can I help you close that upsell or cross-sell better? Like, how can we support, what kind of events can we create? So maybe even just having like a quarterly cadence to check in with them. And by the first planning session, you will know what metrics you're working with. You might have new ones that come along the way. You might have old ones that you just get rid of halfway through. But yeah, maybe like an ongoing quarterly review or something like that. But definitely not a one-off and stop there.
Amazing. Hope that answers the question there, Selva. Typing. Awesome. Now, next question. Paz has a question. Looking forward to hearing this one. Over to you, Paz.
Yeah, thanks, Des, and thanks so much for sharing all your information, Alyssa. I love your knowledge around the importance of feedback and forms, and make sure we're getting the right data in. I'm really curious, as community builders, do you have any recommendations on how often we should be asking our members for feedback? And if so, what would be the best format to get that data? Would you recommend going out and regularly surveying members with the same consistent questions over different amounts of time, or perhaps asking different questions and breaking up so you have varied data in that sense? So yeah, how often should we be asking, and then in what ways should we be asking those questions as well?
Yeah, good question, because I think this really depends on your business too, like what you're selling, product or service. And if you're e-commerce, then almost every product, I guess you can even ask, did you like that dress? I definitely get that all the time from Hello Molly. So it depends, but also you don't want to bombard them, because they're also getting emails from sales, they're getting emails from marketing, they're getting from other team members. And I think maybe you have to trial it for your business. Maybe every quarter could be okay. I know some people do every 6 months. It also depends, are we asking for the sake of asking? Like, what are we going to actually do with the data? Is that 3 months long enough for us to actually measure improvements? So I think there's no real perfect science. I think it's going to be different for each company. And also in terms of the method of asking them, I think definitely easiest is always SMS or email. But of course, people are already inundated with emails and SMS. It's like, oh, not another one. So I'm sure, even if you get responses, there is definitely, it's not perfect science either, because not everyone's going to actually fill it in. So you might have disgruntled people who just never had time to tell you that they're unhappy, or really happy people who never had time to give you feedback. So if there is capacity and budget and time for the business, I think definitely speaking to the customers, also you'll get different insights, because you're having a conversation. They might expand on from one thing to the next, but it's not scalable. But whenever I'm working with clients where we're talking marketing, sales, customer service, and so on, it's always about giving them the freedom to also come back to us at any point. There is no you can give feedback at any point. Like literally, if you're unhappy, please tell us ASAP. So I think from usually I think it's best when a salesperson is even part of the post-sale. Like you manage that relationship. Like you should be part of it before you just hand off and to the next person. So it depends. It's like balancing budget, time, scalability, but also you'll get different insights. And maybe we can reward them somehow. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that element of reward. I always find it so valuable to build up a cadence of like you said, you have that either 3 month or 6 month, that kind of regular cadence and making sure we're not bombarding people. Good thing we don't have any sales or marketing teams in our world. So it's probably emails just from, a couple people in my community. But I really appreciate that, and that element of, making sure they feel valued in exchange for giving us feedback and data is key. So thanks, Alyssa.
And I think if you create that culture of knowing that they can give feedback anytime, then they would be happy to. So I work with a client in the UK, and they sell courses, like programs, and they sell even to big companies, and they would give feedback even when they're like, I didn't like your email, or I didn't like this. So maybe it's a cultural thing too, but I don't really see as many Aussie businesses do that. But if you have that culture of feedback, they will probably feel like, oh, I can give feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, spot on. Thank you.
Feedback, one of the CC's values. Amazing. So thanks for sharing. Any other questions while we do have some time? If we do, we might have time for one more question, which was a pre-submitted question. So Alyssa, I guess lastly, how can a CRM be used to enable the sales versus the admin task?
Sales versus the admin as in like data entry?
Yeah, just general administration that you use in the CRM. So that could be data entry and any other type of admin task that's involved in the CRM.
And the question was, how can the CRM help the salesperson?
That's correct. So how can the CRM be used to enable sales versus admin tasks?
Oh, okay. So admin, let's assume whether it's like maybe a sales activity, or maybe it's like data entry or data cleanup. A CRM means you have a central place, so people know where they're going for certain information. There is like, tasks that gets fired when these things happen. So ideally, those things, as many of those things are automated, whether it's integrating an enrichment tool to update certain fields, even if it's just like phone number or job title and stuff like that. For a salesperson, it's their lifeline. They need to know what was the activities that has happened from marketing, because it gives them context before they even have that first call. You've viewed these pages, you fill in this form, so it look like you're very interested. You viewed like every single solutions page, and then they pick up the call, they leave all these task notes, and they manage that relationship inside a CRM, because you don't want them to be working in spreadsheets and then forgetting, sending themselves like calendar invites, sending themselves like sticky notes, and all that kind of stuff. We have one central place where they look at, okay, Alyssa's profile, Gather and Grow's profile, this is what's happened. Oh, that's interesting. Or maybe even pings back to the salesperson saying, oh, these looks like there is potential interest, even though they may not have done the most obvious sales activity. And then we feed it back to salesperson, which is so important for freeing up their time, but also like generating those revenue goals, which I mentioned in the formula. And then after that, all the information that they collect is so important for the next team. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for sticking around for the Q&A. I don't know if we do have any more questions, but what we might do is we might just wrap up from there. So thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing your expertise and all those sorts of things. We will share those slides so then people can review. I would love to dive into some of those formulas, because I think that needs a bit of a review from my end. But yeah, thank you so much for joining in that session, and all the CCMs that have joined. As we've just said, feedback is one of our main values, so we do believe that feedback is a gift. So we'd love to hear of what you thought of this session. We will put a link where you can share your feedback in the chat. If you would like more support as a community builder to scale your community operations, put your name down in the chat when Community Cohort 3 launches, if you haven't already joined Community Cohort 1 or 2. We're just wrapping up Cohort 2. I'm a part of that, and it's fantastic. So if anyone else would love the opportunity to be a part of that and to understand more about these things in further depth, then Community Cohort 3 will be a fantastic way to be able to do that. That program will launch from September, and it will go for 7 weeks, and will help you with 4 main skills, which is really around community strategy design, public speaking, operations, and then also connecting with other amazing community builders like those in this space. So do pop your expression of interest or share it around with another person in the startup community space. A few other announcements. Tomorrow, for those who are in Brisbane, we do have an event with startup and community meetup in Brisbane with our partners Innovate and Overnight Success. So if you are in Brisbane or if you know someone in Brisbane, we'll pop the link in the chat. So feel free to circulate that around and get involved. And then tomorrow, we'd love to give you a free ticket because we do love providing a gift at the end of these things. So a free ticket to join One Root, how to build an online community for business growth. So use the code in the chat, which is friends in capital letters. And lastly, if you do know a community builder who would benefit from these meetups, feel free to share the link that we'll put in the chat so then you can join this free meetup community so then we can kind of keep the community going. And if you do need anything in the meantime, pop it in the chat. Feel free to reach out, stay connected with Taz, myself, the other CCNs, and Alyssa. And we look forward to keeping in touch and speaking with you guys all soon.